Okay, I've gone ahead and claimed host and we're recording. Looks like we've got a nice crowd so far. I wanted to introduce our facilitators today. Mohamad Qayoom from Louisiana State University Health Sciences Center, New Orleans, and Tony Elam from University of Kentucky. And they'll be talking about the documentation of researcher use cases, and hopefully we can generate a really nice discussion today about how we work with our researchers, what kind of data we're collecting with them, do we use some central tools, and what kind of successes and difficulties do folks have with that. So welcome to the Emerging Centers call. We really appreciate you attending, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Rich. We are glad to be facilitating this call, and all of us are speakers. So please do participate on the call, and we want to learn from all of you about the best practices that you are using to collect research use cases. I will start with how we started collecting these research use cases. I think 6 years ago, we had just gotten into the idea of applying for competitive grants, and this was a National Science Foundation grant. And when I heard about the grant, I said, great, we can apply for a grant, and I have this beautiful network diagram, and I can build a topology and propose all of this. And then I realized that I needed research use cases, and I only had probably 3 weeks to find those research use cases. And at the time, I had no idea how to find those research use cases. So what we did was we walked the hallways. We walked the hallways, we looked at the posters, we read the posters, and we said, this sounds like a good research use case to include in the proposal. And that's how we got started. And of course, that year the project didn't get funded, but that was our starting point, and we learned from there. And then we learned how to engage the users and how to really talk to them and listen to them and be partners with them. So that's my story of how I failed the first time, or how I started to become successful in capturing some of the use cases. So Tony, tell us about how you guys are doing it, and then we'll open it up to everyone. And the first question that we're going to pose after this is, what works and what does not work?
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear me? All right. This is Tony Elam at the University of Kentucky. I think he said it right. You have to have an ongoing discussion. You have to, continuously engage, obviously, with the research faculty in order to be able to understand what they're doing. And so that just takes time, and it takes an effort to get out there and to have the discussions with them. Now, there's a couple things that we have done. We have an annual summit, and we always have parallel talks. We feature the individual research faculty. We change the topics year to year, so that we're always, gathering information about the research from the faculty in that way. We've created a variety of special interest groups that have to do with users from our center, or that are affiliated with our center. So, we have a group of individuals who have special interest in GPUs. And they get together and they talk about their research interests, their challenges, and of course, we're gathering data for that. We have a special interest groups, for instance, on textual analytics and unstructured data analytics. So, through our special interest groups, through the talks, we also asked all of our affiliated researchers to create a research summary slide about their activities, which we then use when we go to conferences, for our little slideshows. But it also gives us then information about, what they're up to, so that when opportunities do arise as far as grant proposals, we're able then to identify the key faculty that we want to then go and solicit to be with us on a particular MRI grant or pursuit of, another opportunity. So that kind of summarizes what we do.
Thank you, Tony. Anyone else? What works for you guys, or something unique that you're doing that we can benefit from? I know you all want to speak at the same time, but take turns. Eric, I think your voice is very, I don't know if it's just me or others are hearing very
Yeah, a little distorted.
Very distorted.
Yeah, it sounds like your microphone's having issues, a little chipmunky.
It's entertaining.
It is.
I think if we can understand what he's saying, we can understand our researchers too.
Yeah. I will say, this is Rich at Cornell. When I moved institutions, I sort of changed networks, and I really had to work, and I'm still in the process of working to build networks. And for me, as Mohamad has said, walking the halls is really important, and looking at projects that people are engaging in. I've also, worked closely with my staff to identify potential new faculty that are coming in, and I've pursued, when I can, meetings with the deans to try and talk about, what our services are and how they could be useful to their particular department, meet the needs of the faculty there. So hopefully, leverage some of the network and build that out as we go.
Thank you,
This
Rich.
is Eric Dermans again. Do I sound better now?
You sound much better.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I agree that getting the faculty together is important, but one of the things that was very crucial to us was that the CIO brokered an arrangement or an understanding with the provost and the vice president for research to provide a context at the upper administration level to really recognize this activity as important and strategic to the university as opposed to some cost center.
Thank you, Eric. Anyone else? What works for you? Is there something that you're doing which is kind of unique?
This is Tony. I'd like to mention something. In a previous institution, I was the director of the Computer and Information Technology Institute at Rice University, which is now the Ken Kennedy Institute. And at Rice, when I took over many years ago as executive director, we started an actual monthly luncheon that the Institute ran. And it's, this was back in 1996 that we started that. And today the luncheon is still being done. It's a monthly event. And we ask each of the affiliated faculty with the Institute, especially new faculty coming in that are computationally oriented. We have a prescribed 30-minute format for their luncheon talk. And I can share information, relevant to that for those who have interest. But that's something that really made a huge impact as far as, building collaborations and helping the Institute grow. Because when I started in '96, we had approximately 30 faculty. And when I left Rice years ago, we had 120 faculty affiliated with the Institute. Today it's even larger, I'm sure. But having that monthly get together and having a prescribed set of information that we request the faculty to give had really helped. It was a huge, so it's all about communications.
Thank you, Tony. Well said. It's all about communications. Claire, you had a point?
Yes, so at the University of California, San Diego, in our research IT program, we have an annual showcase where we highlight 4 or 5 faculty members that we've worked with in that year. And we have them present kind of like lightning talk style their research that they've been working on, and they have the option to highlight the work that we did with them. And they don't have to, obviously, but we've ended up with a couple slides of kind of kudos for some of the stuff that we've done. So that has worked out really nicely. And the actual event has allowed for some of the researchers to create some synergy and have discussions about kind of potential collaborations, which is kind of an exciting thing. One of the new things that we're doing right now, I'm hiring what we're calling a co-located integration engineer. So it's someone who is on my team, but is co-located within the Division of Physical Sciences. It's co-funded between the two organizations, my organization and the division, and it will sit actually in the division. That will be a discipline-specific expert, but a research IT person.
Thank you, Clara. And I think you bring up a good point. A lot of times we are very humble and modest about our contribution and we don't highlight, but when we do highlight, I think we are sending a message as to how we are helping the researchers solve their research problems. Very good. Anyone else? Okay. So the next question that I want to throw out is, what data are you collecting from each researcher? I mean, it's good to know about their science and what kind of science they're doing, but just talking about the science really does not help us too much if we don't have the specifics as to what kind of technology needs they have and how do we solve those problems.
So, I'll lead off on this one. I do kind of assertively collect this type of information. For faculty, I want to know what grad students they're sponsoring on our cluster. When a grad student signs up, I ask who their faculty sponsor is. I asked for, in the past, I've asked for what are you using the cluster for, and I got really inane answers, like for my research or for my PhD or stuff like that. So now I ask for abstracts, and so now I get much more detailed information. I've started a document where I collect this information so I know who's using it, what they're using it for, who's sponsoring and sponsoring who else, what departments they're from. And when I get asked by higher administration, now what's our cluster being used for, I have this like I have this long document with all of these details that swamps them with information. A downside is it is kind of hard to summarize this. I can summarize by academic unit, that these academic units are using the cluster and so forth. But when you get into the details, I mean, it's really hardcore scientific stuff that not everybody wants the details. But that's the approach that I've been taking.
Very good. So in your particular case, I mean, they're all using your cluster for computational needs, right? So, and you want to know exactly what they're doing.
Yes, it is a computational cluster. They're using a lot for modeling, for nanotech, for DNA assembly, those types of things.
Very good. Anyone else? Tony, did you guys do a survey recently, or didn't you guys do something recently?
Yes, we did do a user survey. One of the things that we do now, we're creating a new direction on policy for our users and having levels of different service. One of the things that we're asking and acquiring is that every faculty member or PI that's leading an activity will have a project ID established so that we're going to know what that project is about and what grants may be related to the project and what students then would be, working on that particular project. And so that we can track by project for different PIs, their usage, CPU hours, storage, all of that, how many jobs are being submitted, et cetera. But we can always relate it back then to particular projects and grants. And our survey was more along the lines of, how can we improve our services? How satisfied are you with, performance and problem resolution and things like that. So our survey was much more directed on our user satisfaction, and it was just a few questions.
So were they generally satisfied?
Actually, it was amazing. We had over 90% satisfaction. Amazing. You can always do better, but we've been working hard on that, and we were very pleased with the results.
Very nice. Okay, anyone else? What information, what data are you collecting when you just go talk to these researchers? A lot of times we just know what the researchers are doing, we're just not collecting or documenting those. What are some of the questions you're asking, or maybe you should ask if you're not doing it yet?
Yeah, hello, this is Justin Booth from Michigan State University, and we this fall put out a survey, and our first attempt at a research technology needs survey, and we did it across all technologies that we have within the central IT, from storage to collaboration tools to various things, and it was probably 15 questions. And the first pass, we did it to all PIs that were registered as that had active projects that were in the Office of Sponsored Projects. So we got a list of all the current PIs. The response rate wasn't great, so we need to make some tweaks to that survey and try to get that out again in the near future to see if we can get some more response. And then also we're going to start to work with folks to see if we can't look at how to get at the postdocs and the other HR classifications that would allow us to get to the people that are actually using the technology in the research. We know that may not necessarily be the PIs that are driving that. So we want to get a broader reach and then try to do this yearly. So that's one approach. And then we did build a kind of an interview template. So as we dispersed people out into different academic units, we were all asking similar questions of researchers about how they're using technology. And so we're trying to use that to compile. And that was how we started the survey, was with 25 interviews that started that. So we'll keep doing interviews, in-person interviews, to keep hearing the stories, but then and tweak the survey as we get deeper into it.
Thank you, Justin. Are you willing to share that template if others are interested in it?
Yes, I think that would be something we could easily do.
Thank you. That would be very helpful for the community. So I'm interested in your survey, and I'm sure others are as well, because I also conducted a similar survey. So according to your survey, what's the #1 need of your researchers right now?
Oh, you're gonna put me on the spot. There is, at least what we're seeing a lot of is just clarity on storage and where we can put data. I think that everybody on this call would probably is shaking their heads. And then it was, yeah, so that's clearly, and then understanding the institutional data policy and really asking people what tools they're using, and even knowing what we are not supporting and getting feedback from the tools that are trying to make this as open as possible and a lot of free text so that we can skim that to understand. For instance, we don't support Slack on campus, but we know the researchers are all using Slack, so trying to hear those stories. But yeah, it was really storage was the front and center.
Yeah, I've seen similar results. We sent out a survey probably 3 or 4 months ago, and we had a 12% response rate, which is pretty decent in the world of surveying. #1 demand was data storage. And I think #2, I'm looking at it, is data analysis. So those are the things our researchers are asking for. And so I would love to hear from others as to what their researchers are asking, or maybe you have some questions for Justin or anyone who has contributed so far.
This is Tony again. I'd like to just chime in on one of the questions that we did have on our survey was, from your perspective, which type of resources do you need most, for future acquisitions? And it was still 35% or something of the responders, still wanted more InfiniBand interconnected CPUs for MPI, oriented applications. The next one that was a little less than 30% had to do with growth of our GPU cluster for machine learning and image processing. And then after that, we had the third one was more high memory nodes for big data analytics. And that was, as I recall, about 25%. So that was the results of that question.
Thank you, Tony. Eric, you?
Yeah, so we have a slightly different method to gather information from our users. Our president has mandated that we don't give our users free access. They have to pay something. He subsidizes it, but we have to pay something. And so one of the things that happened a year ago is that we were oversold on GPUs. People were starting to buy GPUs. As you know, in the beginning of 2019 was like a big boost in machine learning everywhere. And so we had a small GPU cluster that was used by people who did molecular dynamics and some engineering and some specialized applications. But all of a sudden, there was a massive demand. And so over the summer, we invested in adding 608 GPUs because we were oversold. We basically had only about 200 GPUs and we had sold 300 of them. So clearly there was a demand. So now we have 600 and we have sold about 360 right now. So,
Very good.
That's how we measure our appetite from our users.
Good. Is there anyone who sits maybe on the IRB board that reviews the proposals and approves proposals? I think that would be a good place to learn about what kind of research is going on. Because a lot of times researchers contact us after their project has been funded and they have no money for the infrastructure, and then they expect us to solve some of those problems. So is there anyone who has maybe some kind of in the IRB where they tell the IT department or research technology as to, well?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that I think we slowly grew over the decade that we're about doing this now. So I'm in IT, I report to the CIO, but over the years I have established relationships with the Office of Research and the people in the IRB and also in the compliance programs for export control. And so very early on, and we've given several seminars to the grant application staff. So most departments, and I think this is quite common in many universities, you have the faculty who write the proposals, but there are some people either in their department or in their college or in the central office of research that help them do the final steps and all the mechanics of the proposals. So we've given lectures or briefings and training to all those people to help them recognize when somebody is mentioning something in a proposal or to reach out to us and make sure that we then contact the PI and say, what is it that you really want to do there? And that has been, it's still not a perfect mechanism by any means, but it has helped a lot.
Thank you. What about other similar experiences?
This is Tony. While at Rice, we actually incorporated through our Office of Sponsored Research a question on all proposal submissions. The internal had a question regarding, is this computational oriented? Do you have the necessary computational resources, to perform, this particular project should you obtain the award. That was very, very useful information. And so we're actually changing our internal approval form at the University of Kentucky as we speak to also now include that similar kind of a question, and asking for people that are doing computation-oriented research to contact our center, prior to submission.
Thank you. Patrick made a comment, and I guess I meant office sponsored SPO when I said IRB, and Patrick clarified, and he said IRB is for human animal subject approval. So I stand corrected. I meant to say sponsored program office. In our building, they're next to each other, so we sometimes use it interchangeably. So thank you for that, Patrick. Any other comments on this? Okay. I think there was someone on one of the calls who was using Trello. Is it you, Rich? Were you using Trello to make a list of your researchers?
Yeah. So I was going to chime in. At Cornell, we do cost recovery, similar to what Eric was describing for utilization. And so we do have like a projects database, but yeah, for myself and some of the directors here, I basically have a Trello stack that includes a card for every researcher with their, sometimes their press photo or whatever photo I can get. So if I'm at the grocery store, and or I see them getting a coffee or something like that, and I know that we work with them, I can at least, give them a hey, and make sure that there's some kind of contact, usually their research focus, their contact information, and any awards or proposals that we've worked on with them. So it's a really quick way to keep tabs on things. I started it with hopes to keep sort of more. I haven't kept it updated, so I guess that it does take work to maintain. It's something where you have to keep up with it, but I do think of it as sort of like a new form of Rolodex, perhaps.
And what other information do you collect there? Do you collect as to what are their needs, and they're using GPUs?
Yeah, usually needs. Whenever the last time I've had a contact with them, I try to keep some notes of that, whatever they've described that within that conversation. The size of their group, if they do, where they are situated, what organization, because Cornell has a lot of different departments that are very diverse, and then. Just whenever I think would be the next good time to cycle back with them for a formal meeting as well.
Very good, thank you. So what are some of the pain points? I mean, this is an emerging center call, and we are not all at the same maturity level. Some of us are still trying to figure out those things. So those who haven't said anything yet, what are some of your pain points? What happens in your organization? There's a researcher, he needs or she needs something. What do they do? Or how do you interact with the researchers? This is when you speak. All right, that's okay.
So I'll chime in, Mohamad.
Go ahead.
We have a lot of folks here who tend to be really heads down on what they're doing. And so it can be very hard to get attention and get to the right, get people interested in the right place. And we sort of have the added issue of being, as a cost recovery center, not everybody wants to hear it's not free. And so we sort of have to get over that hurdle quickly with them and just be really clear from the start. Yeah, you pay for this, but you get a lot more than what you might expect. from a similar service. So we try and like get over the bad news quick, and we also come back to it because a lot of times you have really nice introductory conversations with people, and then they conveniently forget the part where you say this is how much it costs you. But so you sort of have to continue to iterate that a little bit and say, well, we can give you an estimate, we can let you know what that would cost you, and here's how that would work. And so sort of getting and keeping people's attention, making sure that they understand some of the negatives is tough. We also have faculty come here who come from other institutions that have centralized clusters, and we have to explain to them, we don't do that here, and that's not how it works. And that's not a fun conversation always to have, because if this is such a great research university, why doesn't it have a CRAE? And well, that's not how our organization does things.
So Eric, who pays for you said you guys do lunches every year. Who pays for that? I was wondering about that. Do you guys have funds to pay for that, or is it bring your own lunch and we provide a table and chairs? You mentioned that, Eric, right? Who does lunches?
Oh, no,
lunches?
Somebody else. Somebody else.
Oh, someone else.
This
Oh,
is
Tony, yes, you did. Okay.
At Rice University, we had sufficient, just supplies and expense dollars to cover that. So we were very lucky. Here at the UK, we do not have that luxury, so we don't supply the lunches. But we do have special interest groups, and sometimes we do actually meet during lunch, and it's a brown bag. We just have people bring their own lunches. Now, our yearly summit, which now has gone to a 2-day event, where we have a lot of faculty talks and activities. I seek sponsorship so that I'm able to, cover the lunches and the breaks and all that kind of stuff through industry support.
Thank you, Tony.
So a mechanism that we have found to be useful at the University of Florida also takes some slow growing. It's all like gardening a little bit. Like you plant something and it takes several years to get. It is the governance structure of the Research Computing Advisory Committee. And it has been sort of the vision of my boss, the CIO, to try and create that. But now it is a very effective organization, and we have it's actually a large group. The total number of people is about 30, but we have monthly meetings, but as is typical for faculty, not everybody can attend every meeting, and that's not possible. But the result, because we have 30 people, we typically have 10 people every month at the meeting. And then I publish minutes that are available on the website. And these people are true allies in the sense that they then get details about how research computing operates, but at the same time, if there are concerns that they hear from their colleagues, they bring that to me and to my organization, and then we respond to them. And then when something good happens, many of them are big users of our facility, and they tell their colleagues, why it's good. And so that it's instead of, if I go to faculty, which I do, I obviously will sound like a salesman, right? You have to use my services, and it's not as credible as when another customer says, hey, I've been using Eric's services and that really works very well. You should try it out. That's much more convincing than me saying it. And so in that sense, that's one mechanism that has been helpful. Again, not perfect, and it takes a long time to get to the state where people are actually finding it useful to spend an hour every month to come to that meeting. And now we actually, in the last couple of years, we've also been participating in part of the process of policy review. So if the University of Florida comes up with a new policy, the Research Computing Advisory Committee is one of the places where we go, and we have some very intense debates. And there was a really policy that researchers found disastrous, and we persisted in our comments and our negotiations, and we got the general counsel, the vice president of the general counsel involved, and we convinced her that our view was reasonable, and she then chimed with us, and the policy turned out to be better. So once you get it going, it sort of sustains itself, but it takes a long time. But it's worthwhile doing. And a lot of it I had to do by begging people to come and join and serve a term on the committee or whatever.
So since you brought up Research Computing Advisory Committee, who serves on that committee, and how did you start that committee?
They're all faculty members, and the way the process started is by the CIO sending a letter. First, he got approval from the provost and the academy or the cabinet of the president. You know, we want to have a set of advisory committees, and there are multiple. There's one on general infrastructure, there's one on web servers and communication, and there's one on research computing. And then once the committees were formed, then the CIO would send a letter to all the deans of all the colleges saying, we're creating this government's infrastructure and we want some representatives from your college to serve. Who do you recommend? And then they usually contact their department chairs, and we get a couple of candidates, and some of them are very active and some of them are not. But after a couple of years, it has now grown into a group of people that are really committed to help themselves, but also their colleagues, and do some extra stuff for the university as a whole. And then once you get to the point where you can change a policy, instead of just complaining after it's published, but you're part of the process of modifying it so that what gets published is something that you can live by, then that makes them feel, you know, yeah, it was worth my time, because otherwise I would have had to struggle with living with this weird policy or try to change it after it's been approved, but now I'm part of the approval process.
Excellent. That's great. Any questions for Eric? Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Eric. Lauren, I know you guys at University of Wisconsin, you have done a lot of work in gathering the use cases, talking to the researchers and helping them. So what are some of the best practices you guys are using?
Well, one of the advantages that we have, at least since I came in, is that we were sort of established as a research computing center for the campus at that time. We had existed prior. And with my hire, we implemented a process where we meet with every new potential user. So anybody who requests an account, that doesn't trigger an automated account activation process. Instead, it triggers an email to our research computing facilitator team. And then we meet with everybody who gets an account on our system, including their faculty advisor if we haven't met their faculty advisor before. So that makes a huge difference in sort of establishing a relationship that is collaborative and not just sort of customer service provider, and allows us to take notes about the research that that group is doing, that individual is doing, that we keep in a database where we also can sort of manage account access on different servers. So we can search that, we can make connections later. That's really the key for us, is that I can go look through any of that and I can ask another faculty member if they can provide a quick description or update on the research they're doing, or if we see significant usage on our system, another thing we can do is follow up with that particular research group and ask what they're doing. So that's kind of the key for us, I guess.
Yeah, and I would like to sort of second that. Because of our financial mandate that we have to do cost recovery, we had to come up with a structure to organize all of our users, right? Because if it's not free, you cannot have an arbitrary user come in and say, hey, I want to use your facility. There has to be some kind of a structure. So we naturally organized everything around a sponsor PI. So the rule is, or the policy is, that if you're a faculty member at the University of Florida, then you can buy time at these highly subsidized rates or resources, storage, whatever. But that gives us immediately, if a student fills out an account request form, they have to say, who is your sponsor? And then we have an email exchange with the faculty PI. And so then we immediately know what that student is going to do, because if the student is associated with some faculty member in chemical engineering, well, then typically they're going to be doing this kind of work. And then some of our research facilitators who are specializing on the engineering side will then reach out to them primarily, whereas if the person is associated with some faculty member in the College of Medicine who does gene sequencing, then we send them to our bioinformatics specialists when problems arise. So that gives us a structure of our user community. And now this last year, we instituted a new group because it actually turns out that there are what I would call rogue students. So there are students who are doing some work and they have a vision because they're young and bright students, either even at the undergraduate level or definitely at the PhD level, and they want to use some kind of informatics or maybe machine learning in the last year, but their faculty member is more old school and doesn't know anything about IT. So then how do you get that student supported? And so we've now an agreement with the libraries. Because what happens is the students, especially in disciplines like the humanities, where they want to use some new modern computational technique to study something in history or in anthropology, but their faculty member doesn't know anything about computers, then the first place they go is the library, but then they don't necessarily, the library doesn't have compute resources. So now we basically have an agreement that the library will be the sponsor of these students and they have the staff to answer their questions. We train them and they then mentor the student in their individual work. And that gives us now the ability to have essentially provide support to all students if they want to.
Eric, can I ask?
Well received.
Eric, can I ask, so do the students, since you are cost recovery, do the students have to pay for their cycles?
No, the students don't pay for the cycles. Basically, the agreement we have is that the library, the dean of the library provides the staff support to provide the students, and the CIO, my boss, provides the money to have them do their computing, right? So we have a similar deal if a faculty member wants to teach a course, because we are cost recovery, in principle they should pay, but of course that's not reasonable. So that's done on the nickel of the provost. So the provost pays for all the resources that are being used in teaching courses, and the CIO pays for all the resources that are used by individual students that are mentored by the staff of the libraries, and the libraries then provide the staff time and cost.
Okay, thank you. We also have sort of an issue similar, analogous to that, where students come looking for resources and don't necessarily have a faculty sponsor. So this is really useful information for me.
Thank you. Any other comments, Chad? You have a comment.
I require students to have a faculty sponsor, but the sponsor does not have to be directly involved in their research. So in that case, if the student wants to do something a little bit more creative, that's okay, just so there's a faculty member out there that I can call in case things get out of hand, which is extremely rare.
Thank you. Anything else? We have only 15 minutes left. Okay, so I mean, final thoughts. I think it's very important for us to know what kind of research is being conducted at our institutions if we want to effectively solve their problems. And just conducting those interviews, having those templates, creating a database or some kind of directory will help us not just solve the problems, but also provide us opportunities to apply for funding and to show that, look, we have all these researchers and we are solving their problems. And it's good to also collect those successes and say, like, look, like Claire mentioned, we are helping our researchers, and this is what we are doing for the researchers. What I would like to encourage, or maybe challenge you at this point, and I'll start with this, is think about the call we had today, and maybe think about one thing that was discussed, and maybe you want to do something similar at your institution. Maybe your institution has probably everything and you're like, oh no, we are doing all these things. I mean, you may be an exception. But things that were discussed today, think about conducting interviews, think about conducting surveys, conducting just having those Trello cards. Now, those who are not familiar with Trello, Trello is a free, I guess almost free, project management tool where you can use it as a data repository, and that's how Rich is using it. So think about what you can do with the call, or what is one thing that you're going to implement, and the next 14 minutes, maybe we'll give an opportunity to everyone to say, yeah, this is what I will do at my institution. If you're not comfortable speaking, you can use, or you don't have a microphone, you can use the chat feature in Zoom, or you can just unmute yourself and tell what you are going to use. I'll start, and I think one thing that I will do is what Clara mentioned, is collect those success stories and share those stories with other researchers who are not partnering or leveraging our services. And I like the Trello cards idea that Rich talked about, so that when I see them in the coffee shop or grocery stores, I'm like, hey, how many more GPs do you need? So Tony, since you are a co-facilitator, I will ask you.
Well, you can always do a better job of documenting, getting documentation on your researchers. So I'm definitely, we're working on that. I really like the idea about the little new Rolex card system there. So I'm definitely gonna look into that. I was not familiar with that tool, but I'll definitely take a look.
Very good. All right, who's next?
So I'll chime in. Lauren, what you said was really interesting earlier on about sort of collecting these things, and it made me wonder how many people have local customer relations management software. I know Salesforce is like on fire here at Cornell. We haven't looked at it, but it's a question of, does this have value for our organization? How could we leverage it? How do we get our existing data into it? Are other folks interested in looking at that? And I also really do want to do the thing that some folks that Tony had mentioned of using OSP to close the loop on internal proposals. That seems like a really good idea if we can get our OSP educated to make that connection.
Thank you, Rich. All right.
Rich, were you asking if people wanted to discuss on a future call, like how they're storing information about users or research areas?
I wasn't then, but I sure am now. If folks would be interested in that, I would definitely love to hear it, because we could. I think it would be an interesting topic for a call.
Thank you.
Yeah,
All right.
I can contribute to that. Not like a whole lecture, but you know, we are using something, and actually we are in the process of sort of making it more robust, because it was, like most things, grown, and there's some duct tape there that needs to be removed because it's tearing.
Same with ours.
So I'll be able to show you some of our warts, but we've learned some things that need to happen, and that we're trying to implement. And I can definitely talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. And I should have added a little bit of context when I spoke too. I don't think anybody would consider UW-Madison necessarily an emerging center. Even though we only became a research computing center for the campus 7 years ago, that was also 7 years ago. I'm here in part because of my role in CARC leadership and to make sure that the call goes well. So I will try not to contribute my opinion too much or whatever, but I'm happy to speak about things that we do at UW-Madison.
Thank you, Lauren. We can always learn from your experience. Very good. All right, anyone else?
Here at UAF, the CRM idea would definitely be of interest. It's on our roadmap for our research computing systems group to improve our project lifecycle management this year, since it's actually slowing us down, getting new things started, and getting in the way of doing like planning and capacity planning going forward. What do we actually need? What do we need to invest in? So how folks are doing that discussion of that would be great and helpful for us this year. Also trying to get a user survey out this month or next. So anything people are doing that gets shared. I've asked the same question, I think, in Campus Champions and Cask lists and gotten some good feedback. But yeah, anything people are doing or canned questions that got good responses would be, I believe some folks mentioned sharing those earlier would be very helpful and for us.
Thank you, Liam.
So, Liam, a quick question. Is UAF, University of Alaska, Fairbanks?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Good guess.
It's cold there.
It is. It's warmed up in the last week, so we're at 3 above.
Okay. I did some consulting at University of Alaska Fairbanks years ago, and I enjoyed my visits there every time tremendously.
Oh, great. Good.
Speaking of, can I ask, speaking of surveys, are any of you worried about survey fatigue? We're so worried about kind of the instructional people and everybody else trying to get to the faculty that I'm super hesitant to make that effort. I'm wondering how you guys handle that.
Well, in our case, we haven't done one in the last 3 years. So at least from the research computing side, we're not overpounding them, but that's a very good point. So we're trying to be very on point when we do send out the surveys and, make it very easy for them to respond. So actually even what tools people are using to conduct the surveys would be helpful to know, and what have been successful versus what is not.
So I can add.
One of the things that we plan on doing in 2020 is putting 1-year time limits on their accounts on the HPC cluster, and they will get a notice when the year is up, and then they have to apply to renew the account, and we're making it a requirement that they fill out the survey to have their account renewed. We haven't implemented that yet. I just gave them a 1-year notice in December that it's coming, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, when we did our survey a couple of months ago, and this was the first time we reached out to our researchers to ask them about their environments and their challenges. It was a very straightforward survey. We had 9 questions, which included name, department, email address. So those were the 3 questions. And then basically we asked, what's your research area? Do you collaborate internally, externally? 5 top collaborators. And we just gave them a list of resources that they potentially use, and they just check those boxes. So we kept it very simple. I think average time to complete was, I think, between 2 and 3 minutes.
How is your rate of return?
I think between 10 and 12%, which I was happy when I saw that. So the next task for me is to follow up with those individual respondents and now create something that Rich mentioned, or some kind of directory where I have more information about them. So that's the next logical step. Very good. I have a comment from Justin here. I like the idea of annual research summit Claire spoke of, also outlining an ask for CIO to broker engagement with provost and research VP. So thank you for sharing that, Justin. Okay, we have 5 minutes left. Any other comments before we adjourn? All right, thank you very much for participating. Rich, are there any departing remarks you would like to add?
Let me just make a note. If you have not checked into the Google Doc, please check Zoom chat for a link that will let you sign in so that we can track how many people join the call. I think we got almost everybody. I'd really like to thank you for participating in the call. We really appreciate your thoughts and ideas about that. If you do want to put in notes, go ahead and put in your notes and reflections. I did drop a screenshot of one of these Trello cards if people are interested in looking at that at the very end of the call doc. We'll see you again, hopefully in February. And I believe we're looking at maybe strategic planning as a potential topic. If you have ideas for topics, feel free to send them to the Emerging Centers at CARC.org list. We'd love to hear your ideas, comments, criticism, any of that stuff. So like I said, I'm very appreciative of folks joining the call. Mohamad, Tony, thank you very much for being the facilitators and going this really great topic. This has been very useful for me, and I hope it's been useful for everyone else. All right, take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good one.